Hi, I'm Greg, and this is a video review of a custom toy that I designed. A fully transformable Vehicle Team Voltron in the style of the Panosh Place Voltron toy line of the 1980s. I started working on this project back in 2012. In 2014, Michael French of Retro Blasting mentioned this project in a video about Vehicle Voltron. I put a link to that video in this video's description. In 2019, I brought the almost finished toy to the very first VoltCon in Indianapolis. It was a lot of fun to bring that and show it to fellow Voltron fans and collectors. In 2020, I finally completed the Vehicle Team Voltron custom toy, and now in 2024, I'm finally reviewing it. Voltron Defender of the Universe is a science fantasy action-adventure animated television program that premiered in 1984. Consisting of 124 episodes, the show featured two loosely related groups of heroes, each of whom operated a super robot called Voltron. The first set of characters, the overwhelmingly more popular Lion Force, are featured in 72 Voltron episodes, which are based on the 1981 anime program Beast King Go Lion. The Lion Force is a group of 5 heroic pilots who operate 5 giant robotic lions that can combine into a super robot called Voltron. The second set of characters, the overwhelmingly less popular Vehicle Team, are featured in the remaining 52 Voltron episodes, which are based on the 1982 anime program Armored Fleet Die Rugger 15. The Vehicle Team is a group of 15 pilots who operate 15 exploration vehicles. The pilots and vehicles are subdivided into 3 sub-teams. The Air Team, whose 5 vehicles can combine to form the Strato Fighter, the Sea Team, whose 5 vehicles can form the Aqua Fighter, and the Land Team, the 5 vehicles of which can form the Turbo Terrain Fighter. The 15 vehicles can also combine to form another super robot called Voltron. In 1986, the makers of Voltron Defender of the Universe released Voltron Fleet of Doom, an hour-long special that features the Lion Force and Vehicle Team characters and both super robots named Voltron working side by side to stop a common foe. In 1985, toy company Panosh Place released a small but impressive toy line of 12 3 3/4 inch tall, 5-point of articulation action figures, 5 villain vehicles, a Castle of Lions playset, and 5 Voltron lions. Each lion has a cockpit that can carry the action figure of its pilot. The 5 lions can combine to form Lion Force Voltron. The Panosh Place Voltron toy line is my all-time favorite Voltron toy line, probably in part because it was similar in concept to my all-time favorite toy line of any kind, Kenner's now legendary Star Wars toy line of 1978 to 1985. Panosh Place's Voltron toys were based exclusively on the Lion Force episodes of Voltron Defender of the Universe. In 1986, Panosh Place planned to release a second wave of toys, which would have included a small number of Vehicle Team action figures. Unfortunately, this wave never reached the production stage. In 2012, I decided to try to create my own Panosh Place-inspired Vehicle Team Voltron toy. From this point on, I'll use the word rugger when I refer to the vehicles that form Vehicle Team Voltron. The term rugger was used in the original Die Rugger anime, and rugger's more distinctive than vehicle. To focus this toy design effort, I imposed a number of constraints at the very beginning of the project. Each of the 15 ruggers must be able to carry a 3 3/4 inch tall action figure of its pilot. The ruggers must be able to form Voltron. The Air Team, ruggers 1 through 5, must be able to form the Strato Fighter. The Sea Team, ruggers 6 through 10, must be able to form the Aqua Fighter. The Land Team, ruggers 11 through 15, must be able to form the Turbo Terrain Fighter. Each rugger's cockpit must be accessible even when the ruggers are combined as either a sub-team fighter or as Voltron. Voltron must have its blazing sword and spinning laser blade weapons as seen on TV. The spinning laser blades must also be the rotors of ruggers 3 and 4, the vehicles that form Voltron's shoulders. The ruggers and Voltron must follow a visual style that is consistent with the existing Panosh Place Voltron lions. Vehicle Team Voltron must be minimally taller than the existing Panosh Place Lion Force Voltron. Vehicle Team Voltron must have articulation that is similar to that of the existing Lion Force Voltron. Lastly, Voltron must not have a nose cone butt. In the 1980s, Matchbox sold a great-looking toy of Vehicle Team Voltron. The only thing I never liked about it was that, due to how the ruggers combined, Voltron would wind up with two nose cones that stuck out the back and looked like butt cheeks. Besides the Panosh Place Voltron Lion toys, other sources of inspiration for this project included Kenner Star Wars mini-rig toys, Matchbox Vehicle Team Voltron toys, the Warren Vehicle Team Voltron 3D puzzle, and other Panosh Place Voltron toys, specifically the villain vehicles and the shuttle that was included with the Castle of Lions playset. My Vehicle Team Voltron toy needed action figures of all 15 pilots. I used the existing Panosh Place Lion Force pilot figures as scale references as I designed the Voltron ruggers, but I still wanted action figures of the Vehicle Team characters to stand alongside this Voltron. I reached out to a skilled and talented action figure customizer who runs a Facebook page called Hawk63 Custom Action Figures. I put a link to the page in this video's description. The designer graciously agreed to make custom action figures for all 15 pilots. I supplied a number of donor action figures as well as visual references, and he got to work. And here are the figures. From the Air Team, here are the pilots of ruggers 1 through 5. Jeff, Rocky, Wolo, Chip, and Ginger. From the C Team, here are the pilots of ruggers 6 through 10. Crick, Lisa, Tangor, Shannon, and Zandy. And from the Land Team, here are the pilots of ruggers 11 through 15. Cliff, Cinda, Modoc, Marvin, and Hutch. I was so impressed by POC63's work that I wound up commissioning 5 more figures of characters from the Vehicle Team episodes of Voltron Defender of the Universe. From the Drool Empire, a Drool robot soldier, Viceroy Throck, and Commander Hazar. And from the Galaxy Garrison and the Stellar Ship Explorer, Commander Hawkins and Captain Newley. While the custom Vehicle Team figures were being made, I started to design the 15 ruggers. I began by taking an existing Panosh Place Lion Force Voltron and arranging 15 3 3/4 inch scale action figures around it in poses and locations that approximated how I imagined they would sit in each of the ruggers. Originally, I thought I would build Voltron and its ruggers from Lego. I didn't get very far before I abandoned that idea. I didn't own enough Lego pieces, and I didn't want to spend the money needed to buy enough Lego pieces to build a design that I would never take apart. So I decided to use foam core. I made mock-ups of all 15 ruggers, and with the help of gravity, weak magnets, and tape, I was able to assemble them into the Strato Fighter, the Aqua Fighter, Turbo Terrain Fighter, and Voltron. The foam core models were a lot of fun to have in hand, and they made me want to take the design even further. I decided to model the ruggers for 3D printing. I used open source software called Blender, which you can download for free at blender.org. I had to learn Blender from scratch. I had never designed a transforming or combining toy before, and I worked on the project in sporadic chunks of time. So after literally years of working on and off, 3D modeling each of the 15 ruggers, each of which consisted of multiple parts, test fitting things, and printing multiple versions of some of the pieces, I finally finished making the 15 ruggers. And here they are. When I worked on the Vehicle Team Voltron project, I did not, and still do not, own a 3D printer. That will change soon, but for this project, I used the 3D printing service called Shapeways. Unfortunately, in July 2024, Shapeways announced that it had ceased operations and filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. I'll miss Shapeways. It provided a great service, but for a hobbyist like me, it was very expensive for a project of this magnitude. A direct result of the high cost is that the 3D models that you see in this video don't have the precise fit or finish that I would have preferred. Some rugger-to-rugger connections are too loose or too tight, and some of Voltron's joints are too loose or too tight. The number of iterative 3D prints that would have been required for perfection was just too expensive. With all that said, these 3D models do effectively represent my design for a Panosh Place-inspired Vehicle Team Voltron custom toy, and I am happy with how the models turned out. Here is the finished Panosh Place inspired Vehicle Team Voltron toy as the 15 individual rugger vehicles. I 3D printed the ruggers in colors that approximate what I would want real toys of these to look like. Most of the parts were created using a technology called selective laser sintering, and they were made in a material that is referred to as nylon 12. I assembled most of the ruggers parts using superglue. Unfortunately, the colors of some of the parts have faded over time. The transparent parts were always a bit frosted in appearance, and that frosted effect has gotten worse over the years. I didn't paint anything, and I didn't create any decals aside from Voltron's eyes. The existing Panosh Place Voltron toys had great factory-applied stickers. I have ideas in mind for sticker designs, but I didn't actually create any for this. Maybe I will in the future. Alright, let's take a look at the individual rugger vehicles. We'll start with the 5 ruggers of the Air Team, ruggers 1 through 5. This is rugger 1. It's piloted by Jeff, and it forms Voltron's head. Rugger 1's dimensions in inches are 3.1 long by 3.2 wide by 3.2 high, and in centimeters, 7.8 long by 8.2 wide by 8.1 high. This was the first rugger that I modeled for 3D printing. The original 3D print was all white, and I gave it small wheels like the Matchbox toy. But after I started 3D printing the other ruggers in color, I redesigned and reprinted this one in color as well, and I left off the wheels. It just looks better to me. I wound up giving wheels only to the 5 Land Team ruggers, as well as the ruggers that enable the Air Team's Strato Fighter and the Sea Team's Aqua Fighter to roll. A side benefit is that it also seemed like a reasonable cost-cutting move that Panosh Place might have made if they had made these as actual toys. On this 3D print, the twin sliding panels that reveal Voltron's face tend to fall open, much like they do on the Matchbox toy. As for Voltron's face, this is the only part of any of the ruggers that I didn't 3D model myself. I commissioned the face model from Ariel Lemon. It looks great, and it fits into a very small space on the toy, sandwiched between the twin sliding panels on the roof and the cockpit just below. For rugger 1, the cockpit hatch slides forward. I also modeled a surface for a control panel sticker. In this video, whenever you see an action figure inside a rugger's cockpit, I used Panosh Place Lion Force Voltron pilot action figures. I did this because my Vehicle Team Voltron action figures are custom made, and I don't want to risk breaking the paint by posing them. These raised plates are inspired by the raised plates on the sides of the existing Panosh Place Voltron Lion toys. If you look closely, you might notice that on all 15 of my rugger designs, I hid the initials DDR, which is an abbreviation of my legacy Voltron.com message board's screen name, Dudley Drewright. Yeah, it sounds weird. For size reference, here's rugger 1 with 3 Panosh Place Voltron Lions, the Panosh Place Voltron Castle of Lions shuttle, and 2 Kenner Star Wars mini rigs. This is rugger 2. It's piloted by Rocky, and it forms Voltron's upper torso. As I modeled this rugger, I couldn't help but think of a 1950s toaster, or a Twinkie. Rugger 2's dimensions in inches are 5.1 long by 3.8 wide by 4.2 high. In centimeters, it's 12.8 long by 9.7 wide by 10.8 high. The Matchbox toy of Rugger 2 has a spoiler that can be raised for Rugger mode and lowered for Strato Fighter and Voltron modes. I didn't think Panosh Place would have articulated this part, so I compromised by making the spoiler stationary but slightly raised. The underside of Rugger 2 has wheels because the rugger has treads in the TV show, and the wheels allow the combined Strato Fighter to roll. Here's the cockpit of Rugger 2. Rocky is the largest of the Vehicle Team pilots, so the cockpit is larger to accommodate him. As with Rugger 1, I included a surface for a control panel sticker. For size reference, here's Rugger 2 alongside the same toys that I used to show the size of Rugger 1. Here are Rugger 3, which is red, and Rugger 4, which is blue. Rugger 3 is piloted by Wolo, and it forms Voltron's right upper arm. Rugger 4 is piloted by Chip, and it forms Voltron's left upper arm. Rugger 3 and Rugger 4's dimensions in inches are 5.2 long by 3.6 wide by 2.1 high without rotor or 2.5 with rotor. In centimeters, they measure 13.1 long by 9.2 wide by 5.3 high without rotor or 6.3 with rotor. Unlike in the TV show and other toys of Vehicle Team Voltron, I made Rugger 3 and Rugger 4 almost identical. I did this because I wanted to keep these Ruggers in the style of the existing Panosh Place Voltron toys. Aside from their colors, Rugger 3 and Rugger 4 can be distinguished by unique molded details on their sides. These are also ways in which Panosh Place distinguished the nearly identical Red Lion and Green Lion, and the nearly identical Blue Lion and Yellow Lion. Rugger 3 and Rugger 4 are, for all intents and purposes, helicopters. In the TV show, you never see the rotors until, when combined as Voltron, Voltron forms its spinning laser blades. Most existing Vehicle Team Voltron toys have non-removable rotors, which I never liked. My toys for Rugger 3 and Rugger 4 have removable rotors that Voltron can hold in its hands as spinning laser blades. We'll look at that later. The cockpits of these Ruggers have double-hinged hatches. I intended for the pilot to lie face down with their head oriented toward the nose of the vehicle. I intended for one of the raised, pad-like details in the cockpit to be a surface for a control panel sticker. I made the cockpit shorter for Rugger 4 because its pilot, Chip, is shorter than Rugger 3's pilot, Wolo. Panosh Place did the same thing with its Green and Red Lions, since Green's pilot, Pidge, is shorter than Red's pilot, Lance. Here are Rugger 3 and Rugger 4, alongside other toys. This is Rugger 5. It's piloted by Ginger, and it forms Voltron's chest plate. Rugger 5's dimensions in inches are 4.8 long by 5.0 wide by 1.7 high, and in centimeters 12.1 long by 12.7 wide by 4.3 high. I've always loved the design of this Rugger. It's probably what most people think of first when they think of Vehicle Team Voltron's individual vehicles. Here's the cockpit. As with Rugger 3 and Rugger 4, I intended for the pilot to lie face down with their head oriented toward the nose. I intended for one of the raised, pad-like details in the cockpit to be a surface for a control panel sticker. Here's Rugger 5, along with other toys. The 5 Air Team Rugger vehicles combine to form the Strato Fighter. Before the Air Team's Ruggers can be connected to form the Strato Fighter, Rugger 2 must undergo a bit of transformation. Its stubby side assemblies flip up. Its fuselage rotates 90 degrees to the left, and then it slides rearward. When designing how the Ruggers would combine into either a fighter or Voltron, I had to make some unique decisions because these Rugger toys have cockpits. When figuring out how to connect Rugger 1 to Rugger 2, I couldn't follow the TV show or the Matchbox toys, having Rugger 1's large booster slot into Rugger 2's fuselage, because there just isn't enough room inside Rugger 2. I decided to make Rugger 1's booster smaller and have Rugger 1 slot into tabs on the right side of Rugger 2's fuselage. Next, I had to design how Rugger 5 would connect with Rugger 2. Rugger 5 has a U-shaped structure on its underside. This structure grasps a connector assembly on the top of Rugger 2. Rugger 2's connector assembly can pivot 360 degrees. This is handy because Rugger 5 and Rugger 2 must connect in one orientation for the Strato Fighter and in another orientation for Voltron. Rugger 2's pivoting connector assembly allows all 5 Air Team Ruggers, if already combined as the Strato Fighter, to form their corresponding portion of Voltron without disconnecting any of these Ruggers from each other. In designing how to connect Rugger 3 and Rugger 4 to Rugger 2 to form either the Strato Fighter or Voltron, I wanted joints that would turn for Voltron's shoulder articulation, and I wanted those joints to be able to support ratchets. Although ultimately I decided not to implement ratchets for these 3D printed models, I did account for them in the connector design. The ratchets would be internal to Rugger 2's fuselage, and the connector knobs of Rugger 3 and Rugger 4 slot into grooves on rotating structures in Rugger 2. The rotating grooved structures were inspired by the shoulder connectors of the 1980s GoBots Power Warrior. I designed Rugger 3 and Rugger 4 to have symmetrical connector knobs. This allows either Rugger to form either side module of the Strato Fighter, as well as either upper arm of Voltron. This added play value is consistent with Panosh Place Lion Force Voltron, which allows either Red Lion or Green Lion to form either of Voltron's arms, and either Blue Lion or Yellow Lion to form either of Voltron's legs. Here is the fully assembled Strato Fighter. Its dimensions in inches are 7.1 long by 11.3 wide by 5.6 high, and in centimeters, 18 long by 28.8 wide by 14.3 high. As I mentioned when we examined Rugger 2, I gave that Rugger wheels so that the Strato Fighter can roll. Here's the Strato Fighter with all of its cockpit hatches open. As I previously mentioned, I wanted each Rugger's cockpit to be accessible whether the Ruggers are connected or separated. Here's the Strato Fighter with the 5 Air Team action figures that I commissioned from POC 63. For size comparison, here's the Strato Fighter with other toys. Now let's look at the 5 Ruggers of the C Team, Ruggers 6 through 10. This is Rugger 6. It's piloted by Crick, and it forms Voltron's middle torso. Rugger 6's dimensions in inches are 3.7 long by 3.2 wide by 3.1 high, and in centimeters 9.4 long by 8.1 wide by 7.8 high. This was the third Rugger that I modeled for 3D printing. I'll get to the second one later. It was the first Rugger that I modeled specifically for 3D printing in color. It's a straightforward design except for how it connects to other Ruggers. We'll get to that later. Here's the cockpit. The tolerances on the hatch are a lot tighter than I would like. I might fix this at some point. As with the other Ruggers, I included a surface for a control panel sticker. Here's Rugger 6 with other toys. Here are Rugger 7 with the red nose cone, and Rugger 8 with the blue nose cone. Rugger 7 is piloted by Lisa, and it forms Voltron's right upper leg. Rugger 8 is piloted by Tangor, and it forms Voltron's left upper leg. Rugger 7 and Rugger 8's dimensions in inches are 3.5 long by 2.0 wide by 2.7 high, and in centimeters 9.0 long by 5.2 wide by 6.8 high. Rugger 7 was the second Rugger that I modeled for 3D printing. As with Rugger 1, the original 3D print was all white, and after I started 3D printing the other Ruggers in color, I redesigned and reprinted this one in color as well. In keeping with the Panosh Place style, I made Rugger 7 and Rugger 8 almost identical. Each Rugger has distinct details on its sides. The cockpits of these Ruggers have hatches that hinge at the front. I did this because when assembled as Voltron, these Ruggers are oriented nose up, and I didn't want the cockpit hatches to fall open if they weren't fully closed. In each Rugger's cockpit, I included a surface for a control panel sticker. Here are Rugger 7 and Rugger 8 with other toys. Here are Rugger 9 with the red cockpit hatch and one antenna, and Rugger 10 with the yellow cockpit hatch and two antennae. Rugger 9 is piloted by Shannon, and it forms Voltron's right lower leg. Rugger 10 is piloted by Zandy, and it forms Voltron's left lower leg. Rugger 9's dimensions in inches are 5.5 long by 3.0 wide by 4.4 high, and in centimeters 14.0 long by 7.6 wide by 11.3 high. Rugger 10 has the same length and width as Rugger 9, but because Rugger 10 has slightly smaller antennae, Rugger 10's height is a bit less than Rugger 9's at 4.2 inches or 10.6 centimeters. In keeping with the Panosh Place style, I made Rugger 9 and Rugger 10 almost identical. Each rugger has distinct details on its sides and distinct antennae on top. Rugger 9 and Rugger 10 have wheels so that they and the combined Aqua Fighter can roll. With the Matchbox versions of these ruggers, Rugger 9 had a left-hand side pod that would extend when it was connected to Rugger 6 to form the Aqua Fighter. Similarly, Rugger 10 had a right-hand side pod that would extend as part of the Aqua Fighter. In the TV show, sometimes Rugger 9 and Rugger 10, when separated, are shown to have an extended side pod on both sides, so with my Rugger 9 and Rugger 10 designs, either or both side pods can be extended. My versions of Rugger 9 and Rugger 10 have non-removable antennae on top. The Matchbox versions don't have these antennae at all, but they are present in the TV show, and for the original Die Rugger anime, the Die Rugger toys have removable antennae. As with Rugger 7 and Rugger 8, the cockpits of these ruggers have hatches that hinge at the front. In each cockpit, I included a surface for a control panel sticker. Here are Rugger 9 and Rugger 10, along with other toys. The 5 C-Team ruggers combine to form the Aqua Fighter. To connect Rugger 7 or Rugger 8 to Rugger 9 or Rugger 10, you first have to flip the noses of Ruggers 9 and 10 up and over the fuselage. Then Rugger 7 and Rugger 8 can connect to Rugger 9 and Rugger 10 using tabs and slots. Again, these connectors, like many of the connectors in this project, were really heavily inspired by the 1980s GoBots Power Warrior and Power Suits. When connecting Rugger 9 and Rugger 10 to Rugger 6, I couldn't follow the TV show or the Matchbox toys and have Rugger 6's large side pods slot into holes in Rugger 9 or Rugger 10. There just isn't room inside Rugger 9 or Rugger 10 with the cockpits. I designed Rugger 6 so that its side pods can tuck underneath its fuselage, and I designed tabs and rails to connect Rugger 6 to Rugger 9 and Rugger 10. Rugger 7 and Rugger 8 can be interchanged, and Rugger 9 and Rugger 10 can be interchanged as well. Here is the fully assembled Aqua Fighter. Its dimensions in inches are 7.5 long by 7.8 wide by 4.5 high, and in centimeters 19.1 long by 19.8 wide by 11.3 high. The wheels on Rugger 9 and Rugger 10 enable the Aqua Fighter to roll. With these 3D printed models, you can see that the forward sections of the Aqua Fighter, Ruggers 7 and 8, droop a bit. This is because the connection points between Ruggers 7 and 8 and Ruggers 9 and 10 are also Voltron's knees, and it was cost prohibitive to design sufficiently tight ratcheting joints. I might improve this in the future. Here's the Aqua Fighter with all its cockpit hatches open. As I previously mentioned, I wanted each rugger's cockpit to be accessible whether the ruggers are connected or separate. Here's the Aqua Fighter with the 5 C-Team action figures that I commissioned from POC 63. Here's the Aqua Fighter with other toys. And now let's take a look at the ruggers of the land team, ruggers 11 through 15. This is rugger 11. It's piloted by Cliff, and it forms Voltron's lower torso. Rugger 11's dimensions in inches are 5.0 long by 2.4 wide by 5.4 high, and in centimeters 12.7 long by 6.1 wide by 13.8 high. Rugger 11 is my favorite of the 15 ruggers. It's gloriously ugly, like the medical frigate from The Empire Strikes Back, and it has an ungainly antenna on top, like the Star Wars Millennium Falcon. In the Voltron TV show, each time Rugger 11 launches from its command ship, we see it in a near 180-degree fly-around. That's how cool it is. Of all the ruggers, this was the most difficult to design. As the lower torso of Voltron, this rugger has to not only connect to Voltron's upper legs, but also incorporate Voltron's hip articulation. Beginning in the early 2000s, many high-priced Transformer toys began using hip skirts to give the robot a boxy pelvis while enabling the legs to move. This aesthetic wasn't common in the 1980s, so I didn't want my Voltron to have hip skirts. Eventually, I came up with a design that I liked. I wound up carving action figure-like hips into Rugger 11's fuselage. We'll revisit Voltron's hip articulation later. One feature that I added to my Rugger 11 is a rotating antenna. In the TV series, Rugger 11's antenna was sometimes shown to pivot and fire laser blasts. In my design, Rugger 11's antenna is attached to a pivoting turret so that it can rotate a full 360 degrees. In the TV show, it's unclear whether Rugger 11 rolls on unseen wheels or it hovers. I gave my Rugger 11 wheels because it's part of the land team. Rugger 11's cockpit is at the front of the vehicle. I intended for the pilot to lie face down with their head oriented toward the nose. I intended for one of the raised, pad-like details in the cockpit to be a surface for a control panel sticker. Here's Rugger 11 with other toys. Here are Rugger 12 with the blue cockpit hatch and Rugger 13 with the red cockpit hatch. Rugger 12 is piloted by Cinda, and it forms Voltron's right lower arm. Rugger 13 is piloted by MODOK, and it forms Voltron's left lower arm. Rugger 12 and Rugger 13's dimensions in inches are 3.9 long by 2.6 wide by 2.6 high, and in centimeters, 9.8 long by 6.5 wide by 6.6 high. Again, in keeping with the Panosh Place style, I made Rugger 12 and Rugger 13 almost identical. Each rugger has distinct details on its sides. Each vehicle also has a distinct nose, the section that forms Voltron's hands. Each rugger's nose is removable, and it consists of two parts, a half with a Voltron thumb and a half without a Voltron thumb. You can mix and match the half-nose parts with either rugger. This allows you to make either rugger the left or right lower arm of Voltron. You can also give both thumb half-nose parts to one rugger and both thumb-less half-nose parts to the other rugger so that both ruggers have symmetrical noses. Unfortunately, with these 3D printed models, the noses are stuck on. I'll probably fix or reprint these at some point. Like all the ruggers of the land team, Rugger 12 and Rugger 13 have wheels. Here's the cockpit. I had to make a cockpit hatch hinge to one side. If the hatch were hinged at the back of the rugger, then the hatch wouldn't be able to open when the rugger was combined as either the Turbo Terrain Fighter or Voltron. And if the hatch were hinged at the front, then when combined as Voltron and posed with arms down, the hatch might fall open if it weren't closed properly. In each cockpit, I included a surface for a control panel sticker. Here are Rugger 12 and Rugger 13 with other toys. Here are Rugger 14, which is yellow, and Rugger 15, which is black. Rugger 14 is piloted by Marvin, and it forms Voltron's right foot. Rugger 15 is piloted by Hutch, and it forms Voltron's left foot. Rugger 14 and Rugger 15's dimensions in inches are 5.5 long by 3.0 wide by 2.1 high, and in centimeters, 13.9 long by 7.5 wide by 5.3 high. In the TV show, these ruggers look like minivans. In my version, they look like flatter minivans. I did this because I wanted, again, to keep the Vehicle Team Voltron robot minimally taller than the Lion Force robot that Panosh Place made. In keeping with the Panosh Place style, I made Rugger 14 and Rugger 15 almost identical. Each rugger has distinct details on its sides. Like all ruggers of the land team, and like most minivans, Rugger 14 and Rugger 15 have wheels. The wheels of these vehicles enable the combined Turbo Terrain Fighter to roll. Each rugger's cockpit is at the front of the vehicle with a hatch that slides open to either side. On these 3D printed models, the hatch slides way too freely. I might fix this at some point. I intended for the pilot to lie face down with their head oriented toward the nose. I intended for one of the raised, pad-like details in the cockpit to be a surface for a control panel sticker. Here are Rugger 14 and Rugger 15 with other toys. The 5 land team ruggers combine to form the Turbo Terrain Fighter. Rugger 14 and Rugger 15 slot into the wheel assemblies on the bottom of Rugger 11. Rugger 12 and Rugger 13 slot into tabs on the left side of Rugger 11. In this combined form, I like to rotate Rugger 11's antenna turret 90 degrees left of center so that it points forward on the combined vehicle. Here is the fully assembled Turbo Terrain Fighter. Its dimensions in inches are 6.7 long by 6.1 wide by 6.0 high, and in centimeters, 17.1 long by 15.5 wide by 15.2 high. Thanks to the wheels of Rugger 14 and Rugger 15, the Turbo Terrain Fighter can roll. Here's the Turbo Terrain Fighter with all its cockpits open. As I previously mentioned, I wanted each rugger's cockpit to be accessible whether the ruggers are combined or separated. Here's the Turbo Terrain Fighter with the 5 land team action figures that I commissioned from Pox 63. Here is the Turbo Terrain Fighter with other toys. And here are the 3 fighters together. The Air Team's Strato Fighter, the Sea Team's Aqua Fighter, and the Land Team's Turbo Terrain Fighter. We've looked at all 15 ruggers and the 3 sub-team fighters. Now let's form Voltron! To connect Voltron's feet to its lower legs, Rugger 14 and Rugger 15 slot into assemblies on the backs of Rugger 9 and Rugger 10. To connect Voltron's lower legs to its upper legs, the noses of Rugger 9 and Rugger 10 have to be flipped up and over their fuselages. Then Rugger 7 and Rugger 8 can connect to Rugger 9 and Rugger 10 using tabs and slots just as they do when forming the Aqua Fighter. To connect Voltron's upper legs to its lower torso, the noses of Rugger 7 and Rugger 8 slot into tabs on the left side of Rugger 11. To form the remainder of Voltron's torso, tabs on Rugger 6's left side slot into Rugger 11's right side. Then Rugger 2's left side slots into Rugger 6's right side. To connect Voltron's upper arms to its torso, Rugger 3 and Rugger 4 join to Rugger 2 in the same way that they do when forming the Strato Fighter. To connect Voltron's lower arms to its upper arms, Rugger 12 and Rugger 13 slot into Rugger 3 and Rugger 4. To connect Voltron's head to its torso, Rugger 1 slides into tabs on the right side of Rugger 2, just as it does when forming the Strato Fighter. To reveal Voltron's face, the twin panels on the roof of Rugger 1 slide open. To finish forming Voltron by attaching Voltron's chest plate, the tabs on the underside of Rugger 5 fit into slots in the connector assembly on the roof of Rugger 2. After having taken a close look at 20 action figures, 15 individual Rugger vehicles, and the 3 sub-team fighters, here, finally, is the Panosh Place-inspired Vehicle Team Voltron in all its robotic glory. Voltron's dimensions in inches are 18.7 tall by 11.3 wide by 5.9 deep, and in centimeters, 47.5 high by 28.8 wide by 15.0 deep. Like the existing Panosh Place Lion Force Voltron toy, this Vehicle Team Voltron is a chunky robot. If you closely examine the Lion Force Voltron toy, you'll see that it is just about as small and as short as it can possibly be, while still supporting the 5 separate lions with action figure cockpits. Similarly, Vehicle Team Voltron is just about as small and as short as it can possibly be, while still supporting the 15 separate Rugger vehicles with action figure cockpits. How does this minimally taller Vehicle Team Voltron compare to the Panosh Place Lion Force Voltron? Vehicle Team Voltron towers over Lion Force Voltron. It's not even close. Because each robot is only as tall as it needs to be, it's only logical that a robot that holds 3 times as many action figures as another robot will be taller than that other robot. Matchbox had already set the expectation that Vehicle Team Voltron could be larger than Lion Force Voltron. Vehicle Team Voltron's articulation is basic, which is what you would expect from a toy made in the 1980s. It has 360-degree shoulder rotation. In a real toy with this design, the shoulder joints would have ratchets. The robot also has bicep swivels just above where the elbows would be. Incidentally, I considered giving this robot elbow articulation, but it complicated how the upper arm and lower arm ruggers would connect, and it doesn't seem like a design choice that Panosh Place would have made either. Voltron also has hip and knee articulation. The hips can bend forward up to 90 degrees, and the knees can bend backward up to 90 degrees. Because of the 3D printing expense, I didn't do the iterations needed to develop proper hip or knee joints. These images from Blender, the software that I used to model the ruggers, show how the hip and knee joints are supposed to move. This Voltron custom toy includes 3 weapons. The 2 removable shoulder rotors from Rugger 3 and Rugger 4 can become Voltron's spinning laser blades. Voltron can hold either or both in either hand. These blades really do spin. You might have noticed that these blades have 4 spokes as opposed to the 3 of the Matchbox design. This was a deliberate choice because in the anime, the blades have 4 spokes. Each spinning laser blade has a diameter of 2.5 inches or 6.3 centimeters. Finally, Voltron includes its blazing sword. This was the last part that I 3D modeled for this project. Blazing Sword's dimensions in inches are 11.7 long by 1.8 wide by 0.8 deep, or in centimeters, 29.6 long by 4.6 wide, or 2.0 deep. If this were a truly manufactured design by Panosh Place, the spinning laser blades and the blazing sword would almost certainly be chrome rather than white. As I planned from the beginning of this project, all 15 cockpits are accessible even when the 15 ruggers are combined into Voltron. Also, as planned from the beginning, this Panosh Place-inspired Voltron does not have nose cone butt. Here's Vehicle Team Voltron with the action figures that I commissioned from Pox 63. They look really great together. And once again, here's my Panosh Place-inspired Vehicle Team Voltron alongside Panosh Place Lion Force Voltron. Robeasts, beware! Here's my Voltron alongside other Voltron toys from various companies. Matchbox Vehicle Team Voltron, Matchbox Miniature Vehicle Team Voltron, Toynami Vinyl Robot Collection Vehicle Voltron, and a knockoff of a mid-sized die rugger. And here's my Voltron alongside Toynami Shogun Warriors die rugger, which is 24 inches or 60 centimeters tall. Lastly, here's Panosh Place inspired Vehicle Team Voltron and all 20 of the custom figures by POC63, along with the entire Panosh Place Voltron toy line. I'm speaking only for myself, but I sure wish Panosh Place had made something like this. And more bad guys, and Voltron-sized Robies, and Castle Doom, and you get the idea. I love the Panosh Place toy line, and anything they could have done to add more to it would have made that great line even greater. From start to finish, this project lasted from 2012 until 2020. It was a long journey, but I'm happy to have reached the destination. Someday, with my own good quality 3D printer, I might revisit this Panosh Place design and improve some things. I might design proper ratcheted shoulder, hip, and knee joints for Voltron. I might improve the connections between the various ruggers. I might make Voltron's feet, Rugger 14 and Rugger 15, a little less boxy. I might make some of the cockpit hatches less fragile. And I'd modify their tolerances so that they close more securely while being easy to open. I would also design and apply decals to the ruggers, control panel stickers for the cockpits, and unique decals for each rugger's exterior. Panosh Place's 1980s Voltron toy line was small and short-lived, but it was the intersection of my favorite toy concepts from childhood. Star Wars-like 3 3/4-inch action figures and related vehicles and playsets, and transforming robots. And it was Voltron! I had a lot of fun designing my own additions to the Panosh Place Voltron toy lineup. Every time I look at and interact with them, I feel like a kid again, from days of long ago. Once again, thanks to POC63 for creating all 20 Vehicle Team Voltron action figures. Thanks to Ariel Lemon for 3D modeling Voltron's face. And thanks to Michael French for featuring this project on his excellent Retro Blasting YouTube channel. We're done. Thanks for watching this video all the way through to the end. I hope you enjoyed it, and let's Voltron.